Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things with Chris James, broadcasting from the auxiliary radio station for Arkanasa Radio in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Just got back from the Edinburgh UFO Conference and Festival. It was quite a happening. If you weren't there, you missed quite a lot. It's not all that far from Laredo. It's about 150 miles. I like taking the scenic route, 83 South. I go through a lot of small communities and look at a lot of old buildings as I go. The reason I was heading there, the Out of This World UFO Festival and Conference, was about to take place. Why hold a UFO gathering in Edinburgh? In either October or November 1966, a strange occurrence took place late one night. On FM 490, approximately 4 miles west of U.S. Highway 281, just to the north of Edinburgh, a motorist spotted 8 men on the side of the road. These guys were yelling and screaming for help. The motorist stopped to find out what was wrong. After talking to them, he drove to a nearby truck stop in order to call the sheriff's department. The radio operator working that night took the call, and then he sent J.R. Milo Ponce, a deputy sheriff with the Hidalgo County Sheriff's Department, to investigate the caller's story. The dispatcher stated that someone had called in to report a group of disturbed men standing along FM 490 just north of Edinburgh, Texas, near Laguna Seca Road. When Deputy Ponce and his partner arrived at the scene of the disturbance, he found 8 men. The workers told the deputies of having seen bright lights and hearing a loud humming or a throbbing sound. They also experienced sudden strong winds on a very calm night. They saw flames come shooting down out of the sky, setting all of the surrounding area on fire, which included their vehicles and the mobile home that they'd been staying in. The caliche pit workers were a crew of 8 men from North Texas. All of them told the same story of that eerie night. The men were taken to the sheriff's office where they were interviewed and then allowed to spend the night. None of the men wanted to return to the caliche pit even in order to recover their personal belongings. They swore to the sheriff's deputies that they would never return to the site of the incident. The story says they all left the following day by way of a Greyhound bus, happy to have simply escaped with their lives. Joe Ponce, the son of the deputy first sent to the scene, says that Sheriff E.E. Vickers had told his dad he'd been approached by 2 men dressed in military uniforms who asked to see the reports about the incident. Vickers, a resident of Donna, Texas, was the county sheriff from 1955 to 69. Vickers thought the men might have come from Moore Air Base, which is located about 10 miles southwest of the site where the incident happened. Now, there's a whole great big story surrounding Moore Air Base, but I'll save that for another show because it would probably take me an hour just to go through it all. Joe recounted the day after the incident. He was taken to the scene by his father. The entire area around where the caliche pit was being dug had been burned. There were several pickup trucks, an old trailer, and some earth-moving equipment that were all badly burned. Joe had been 18 at the time. Noe Torres, a local UFO investigator, looked into the scene years later. There were still pieces of burned metal laying around the field. Some of the rocks showed signs of having been scorched. The sheriff's department has no written reports from the night of the attack. The uniformed men apparently took everything pertaining to the case away to be buried in some government vault somewhere. This mysterious 1966 UFO incident helped encourage Edinburgh city officials to contact Noe about developing the Edinburgh Out of This World UFO Festival and Conference. This get-together is held each year in April. It is the third best UFO conference in the entire world. Not bad for a small town in Texas. If you've never been, you don't know what you're missing. A lot of people will make preparations to drive to Roswell or even Los Angeles to attend their UFO conferences, not ever realizing that right here in Texas, right on the border, we have a fantastic UFO event that lasts 3 nights. Noe Torres is an author, publisher, UFO investigator, and a MUFON member in Texas. He was on the show several years ago. He holds a bachelor in English and a master in library science from the University of Texas in Austin. Along with UFO researcher Ruben Uriarte, who has also been on the show several times, Noe has authored a number of books relating to the UFO phenomenon and appears frequently on TV and on radio. So far, between the two of them, they have written Mexico's Roswell, The Other Roswell, Aliens in the Forest, The Kiami Incident, The Real Cowboys and Aliens, which is UFO Encounters of the Wild West, and Fallen Angel, which is the story of the Laredo Incident. What could have motivated an attack on a group of men working, digging a pit on the side of the road? Could they have accidentally disturbed some hidden item the beings from outer space wanted kept secret? Could there have been something buried there on the side of the highway that they may have accidentally uncovered, alerting the aliens to their presence? Or could this have been some secret government project set into motion with an unexpected outcome? Until the government releases the records, we may never know. Some folks might think a UFO get-together in a border town wouldn't be worth the trip. As I said, this is the third biggest and best UFO gathering in the world. The entire city goes all out to make this event fun and informative. The affair is 3 events in one. The first part is the open mic night. People are encouraged to share any UFO stories or encounters they may have had. This is usually held in the auditorium, but this year it was held in the food truck park right across the street. Open air and a bit of heat as well. The next part of the assembly is the UFO Festival. Held each year at the City Hall courtyard, this is a family-friendly event and it's free. You get to meet the speakers who will be at the conference. It's a casual gathering. The speakers are there to talk and have your picture taken with them. The conference, which is the big event, you want to order your tickets ahead of time so you can save some money and not have to wait in line at the door. Just days after the conference finishes, the people begin working on the next one. They take 11.5 months to make sure that the conference and festival will be well put together. When I'm traveling, I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts instead. You listen to music and it relaxes you, and, well, that could possibly lead to some difficulties, like you wake up in a ditch somewhere. The podcasts I listen to, such as paranormal sideshow and expanded perspectives, they'll keep you awake. The trouble is, when you arrive at your destination, sometimes you don't want to get out of the vehicle because maybe the show still has some to go. It's happened to me many a times where I've sat in my truck wondering, should I pause the show and go do whatever it is I'm there to do, or just sit there and keep listening? On Paranormal Sideshow, John Edwards likes to come up with lists of things he considers either the best or the worst things out there. Stacy, his wife, reads the news, to which he will often cut in with some bizarre comments. It is well worth listening to. They are a hilarious couple, and it's a very informative show. They talk about things you won't hear if you listen to the mainstream folks. Their show runs anywhere from an hour to 3.5 hours, depending on what they're doing that week. As I was driving, I passed over 50 DPS units as I was heading south. With so many Border Patrol agents being tied up processing the massive alien invasion, the Texas governor sent the Highway Patrol to work the area where smuggling is prevalent. I saw a lot of people sporting handcuffs sitting on the ground. Don't go feeling sorry for those bracelet wearers. These are not nice people. They will charge their customers as much money as they can squeeze out of them. If it turns out the person can't pay, their families might be threatened or taken hostage. Women get specially nasty treatment. And not just one or two of them, it's something like 90%. Smugglers are a bunch of lowlifes, right down there with politicians and TSA agents. Once in Edinburgh, I pulled my trailer into the Orange Grove RV Park. Last time I was there, the place was full of orange trees, all sporting nice green leaves, and there was plenty of fruit. The ice age we had a few weeks ago killed off a lot of the trees. It kind of looked like a scene from a horror movie. It was just one of those things when the valve on the back of my toilet decided this would be a good time to start leaking. When things get paid off, they tend to want attention. You can't just park an RV in your yard and drag it all over the country on occasion and expect things not to break. It gives me something to do when I'm not doing the podcast or researching for the podcast or reading books or all the other things I get to do. Yeah, if you own a vehicle or a house or an RV or just about anything, there's some maintenance involved. It wasn't a huge leak, but it was enough that I decided I'd just do without water. Not a big problem. I was just about a half a block from the showers, and I hooked up a hose and ran it to the side of the door, and when I needed to do the dishes, I just did it right there in the yard. It got up to 100 degrees Thursday and Friday, so as long as the AC kept pumping out cold air, I was a happy camper. Literally. Each year I try to help out at the open mic night. I read up on all the UFO stories that I've gotten from people over the years, the stories that people have told, but not to the public. Daniel Jones, he was on the show May 4th, 2018, was the guy in charge. I thought it was going to be like the last open mic at the auditorium. I'd been on stage with Noe Torres for a couple hours. Well, this year they did a lot of things differently. The city held the event in the food truck park right across the street from City Hall. They set up a table for me to sell some books. Too bad I left all of my book-selling stuff in the trailer. My little square so I could charge cards, and all my cash so I could make change whenever somebody bought something. Didn't see any reason to bring it since I thought I was going to be on stage. Well, good thing I arrived early, because now I had to run back to the RV park, which was only 4 miles away. I jumped in my truck and sped, or rather slowly crawled, 4 miles. The traffic was ridiculous. It took me 20 minutes to drive 4 miles. I think I hit every light on a red. It only took me 5 minutes to come back. Good thing I did, because as soon as I got set up, I was selling books. Next year, I'm definitely bringing my floor fan. It would have been nice to move some air around. It was hot, and there was barely a breeze blowing. Once we were on stage, the idea was to encourage folks to come forward and tell any UFO-related encounters they'd had. Public speaking can be uncomfortable for some. I was there to fill in any gaps by telling the reports I had gotten from people willing to tell their stories to me. After a bit, people began to relax, and quite a few came forward to tell the audience about their close encounters. All in all, I'd say it was an excellent night. It finally cooled off once the sun went down. I told several stories from people I have interviewed. Here is one I didn't tell, since I was only filling in the blank spots until others came forward. I had it in my notes just in case. It's from 2010. At around 10:30 p.m., while panning the night sky with his third-generation night vision scope, Ishmael was just looking at the stars when he saw a 3-sided flying craft passing over northeast Laredo. The craft was totally shrouded in infrared light, which is invisible to the naked eye. Resembling a triangle and with a sphere at each of its points, this UFO had no sound of any propulsion and silently cruised at approximately 1,000 feet above the ground. After catching which would amount to one of the best images of an unknown craft, Ishmael thought it may have been a secret military aircraft or maybe even a drone. Drones were out back then, but everybody didn't have one yet. Standing there all alone in the dark, he recorded a mystery that was well worth pursuing. After showing the video to the other LPRS members, they had the images analyzed using color spectrums and temperature filters. The video specialist also used image control as he tried to dissect the information held in the camera. The specialist noted a light that cloaked the aircraft or the triangular UFO with infrared light that could not be seen with the human eye, only through the night vision camera. The video has provided other professional videographers and experts in ufology an amazing amount of evidence of an unknown craft, either from out of this world or something controlled by the military. We may never know the truth about this mystery craft that flies with no combustion, no engine sound, and cannot be seen with the naked eye, only with sophisticated night vision cameras. We don't know if this is extraterrestrial, natural phenomena, or something secret from the military. For now, we call this a paranormal experience. If you'd like to see the video, just type in Laredo Triangle on YouTube and enjoy. After viewing the strange craft, Ishmael was unable to sleep until 7 o'clock that morning. This was one of those experiences that makes life worth living. Noe Torres had invited the LPRS to attend the Roswell UFO Festival. Mr. Torres was presenting at Roswell and thought the LPRS would be a great addition to the lineup. So, Ishmael, Gabby, Joe, Claudia Alvarez, their son, Rick Rodriguez, and a few others packed their bags and headed to the home of one of the biggest UFO stories on the face of the earth. Once they were there, Ishmael told Gabby that Stanton Friedman is at the museum, to which she said, "Who's that?" Once Ishmael was able to stop sputtering, he said, "I want to show him the video of the triangle." They walked over to the Roswell Museum to speak to the godfather of ufology. There he was, the man himself. I remember the day I got to meet him. Ishmael approached and said, "Mr. Friedman, my name is Ishmael Quayer. I'm a UFO investigator from Laredo, Texas, and I would like to show you a flying triangle I caught on video." Stanton Friedman checked his watch, and he said, "I have 10 minutes until my presentation." Ishmael said, "I have my laptop in the truck. I'll run get it and show it to you." Stanton Friedman probably met 30 or 40 people wishing to show off their photographic evidence every day. Running down the block, Ishmael tried to get there and back in seconds. Well, it took minutes. Too many minutes. Gasping for breath, sweat running in his eyes, he made it back with just minutes to spare. As any computer would, it took too long to open. Then, there it was, the Laredo Triangle. Mr. Friedman said, can you rewind it?" Then he called his wife and his son over to look at the video. Looking at Ishmael, Stanton Friedman said, "Would you wait right here? I'll be back as soon as I finish my presentation." Later, once he'd returned, Mr. Friedman said, "The video quality is very poor. You need something in it to give perspective. Next time, try to get a street light or something like that in the shot. And get yourself in there, too." Ishmael did say that he had managed to catch the corner of his house in the video. As Stanton Friedman asked about any sounds, it had been silent. Now that he had the man's total attention, Ishmael began running through all the photos from the LPRS. Later, it was announced that Mr. Friedman was coming to Laredo. He would be here November 2012. People were talking about the upcoming event. Tickets were being sold. Calendars were being scrutinized. Schedules were being changed. People were going to make sure they could be there to listen to Mr. Friedman and to see other folks interested in UFOs. Then came the confusion. Somebody said the conference had been canceled. Then somebody else said the conference was being moved. It was going to be held at a different time, a different location. Then it was going to be in a different city. All of this was being spread from place to place, and not just by word of mouth, but there were a few announcements on the radio. I showed up the morning of the conference, and there were dozens of people in the parking lot asking if the conference was still on. We all went inside, and there were all the vendors set up, people milling about looking at books and T-shirts. Unfortunately, with all that confusion, many people didn't bother showing up. The ticket sales were not good. This was the second and last UFO conference ever held in Laredo. The idea had been to have several UFO conferences all along the U.S.-Mexican border. There was the Edinburgh UFO Conference, the Laredo UFO Conference. There was a Presidio UFO Conference and the Del Rio UFO Conference. They were all to be held kind of in conjunction with each other, spread out through the year so that every couple of months you would have something interesting to attend. Unfortunately, a lot of these conferences just didn't last. Laredo crashed and burned after the second conference. Presidio decided that they weren't going to do a UFO conference anymore. They wanted to be more mainstream, or as the way I like to call it, lame-stream. So they changed it from a UFO conference to some kind of a bizarre, scientific, boring get-together. Del Rio did manage to last a few years, but then they kind of stopped having their conference. Now this left only the Edinburgh UFO Conference still going. As a result of all that, there I was on stage in Edinburgh talking about UFOs. The evening was drawing to a close, but people were still crowded around my table, talking and looking over my books. The cleaning staff moved around us until I finished with my last customer and loaded up my truck. I got back to the trailer, managed to crawl into bed by about 1:30 in the morning, even though the open mic night was over at 8 o'clock. We people do like to talk. The advantage of staying in an RV over a motel are many. It's your place. It's like coming home at the end of the day, as opposed to walking into some room designed and decorated by somebody that has weird ideas. There's no waiting for an elevator. If you're hungry, you have a kitchen right there. It's never closed. You don't hear your neighbors. There's no doors banging or kids running up and down the hallways. Plus, I could park right outside my door. The UFO Festival was held at City Hall Courtyard. To spread people out a bit, the food truck park was also being used. I arrived early so I could grab the most advantageous spot. I wanted to have any breeze blowing so I just might cool off a bit. I checked the angle of the sun so as it went down I wouldn't lose my shade. At the table right next to mine was Daryl Sims, who had a hit TV show, Alien Hunter. I got this from a website. He is the world's leading expert on alien abductions. He has over 38 years of field research focusing on physical evidence and has had some groundbreaking discoveries of alien implants and alien fluorescence. Daryl refers to this as alien sweat. When an alien being touches us, humans, they leave behind physical evidence in the form of handprints that will show up when exposed to ultraviolet light. This only lasts about 24 hours, but it will show up if you've had a close encounter. Daryl takes his photos of alien handprints and had them turned into silicone hands. The kids all got a kick out of how the fingers would move. Looked kind of creepy. Daryl is a former military police officer and CIA operative. He has a unique insight to the alien organization which he believes functions similar to an intelligence agency. Sims is also a compassionate and skilled therapist who has helped hundreds of alien experiencers all over the world come to terms with what they've witnessed and experienced. We talked back and forth as we set up our tables. It was hot, so the city had folks running around handing out cold water bottles. That way we wouldn't pass out. What surprised me was any time a group of people would show up at Daryl's table, once he'd talk to them, he would tell them to be sure and come over to my table and look at my books. He referred to me as some kind of a ghost expert, which kind of made me feel weird. But he was constantly telling people, yeah, you need to check out this table next door. When it was time for Daryl to judge the costume contests, he would leave his books and DVDs in my care. I managed to sell a few for him. Every time I've been to the festival, all the speakers have been more than friendly. Hardly any of them have had the big head thinking they're special since they've been on TV. Ben Hansen had the table to my right. You might recognize his name from Fact or Faked and Ghosts of Morgan City, as well as several other TV shows. I got to talking to him a bit before the festival opened. It was kind of funny. We had an ex-CIA operative, a retired Border Patrol agent, and a former FBI special agent all in a row. Being placed in between two speakers, I had a lot of folks passing my table. Most would stop to see what I was offering, and this led to a lot of books being sold. I tell people I only sell my books for $10 since I've never had my own TV show. I'm thinking I should raise the price since gas is going up along with everything else we need every day. Is $15 asking too much, I wonder? I'll wait and see how things go. And on that, I'll take just a very brief pause to play a couple of commercials and drink some coffee. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this. Did you stay up all night watching horror movies and now you think your house might be haunted? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society and have them come by and check out your house. Maybe you accidentally invited a ghost or a spirit, or maybe it's just the plumbing. You can contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. It's a bird. It's a plane. I need to get my eyes checked. Where am I going to get my eyes checked? Why, at Optica del Norte, 107 Calle del Norte, right across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. It's time to take better care of your skin. After all, it is the biggest organ in your body. Contact Lourdes James at 956-723-3019. Talk to her about a free skincare consultation. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. While I was there selling books, Willie Garcia showed up. He was my roommate when I first arrived in Laredo back in 1988. We went to the Border Patrol Academy together. He stood next to my table, and we visited any time there was a break in the traffic. It's kind of funny and a bit sad how, as we go through life, people will enter our lives and then move on. It gets difficult to keep in touch as life goes on and more things come up needing our attention. Texting or messaging just isn't the same as actually visiting with people. It's like watching TV shows and then getting to talk to the people you've seen. By going to the conferences, you get to meet and speak with the people you think you know from watching Ancient Aliens or Finding Bigfoot. A lot of actors are under the impression because they can pretend to be someone they are not, it makes them special. The folks we see on TV, like from the Travel Channel or the Sci-Fi Channel, don't have that kind of attitude. They're people just like us that you can talk to and get a photo with if you attend these conferences. Me and Willie tried to go over everything from the past 60 years that has affected our lives. That's a lot to talk to in a couple hours' time, but especially when you've got hundreds of people milling about and kind of getting in the way. It was a good time, though, and having Willie there just made it that much nicer. Just a note, the Texas Bigfoot Conference will be held in Jefferson, Texas in October. Craig Woolheater said this year's conference must be capped at 75% capacity or 260 guests. Due to the Texas Governor Abbott's coronavirus orders. Of course, maybe things will change by October. Cliff Barrickman will be there this year, along with many of the regulars like Ken Gerhart and Lyle Blackburn. Mark your calendars for October 16th through 18th at the Jefferson Visitors and Transportation Center, which is located at 305 East Austin Street in downtown Jefferson. If you've never been to Jefferson, you're missing quite an interesting town. A lot of the people at the UFO Festival dressed up for the costume contest. Some folks looked as if they were dressed up for the contest, but it turned out that was their regular look. Attending the festival to walk around and look is a lot different from going there to have a table. I didn't get to see much unless it walked up to me. I met a ton of people and I sold a lot of books, but I never saw any of the cool things going on, not right in front of me. That is why I was there. I got to make contact with folks who have some interesting things happen, and hopefully I'll get to put them in my next book. Several people asked me what my take on the information about the UFOs that was attached to the COVID-19 relief bill. The UFO disclosure started when President Trump signed the latest COVID-19 stimulus bill. At the end of the countdown, the Pentagon and other spy agencies have to reveal what they know about UFOs to the American public. The Senate Intelligence Committee says all the observed airborne objects that have not been identified should be included in a detailed analysis of unidentified phenomena data collected by A. Geospatial intelligence, B. Signals and intelligence, C. Human intelligence, and D. Measurement and signals intelligence. In addition, the report will include detailed analysis of data of the FBI, which was derived from investigations of intrusions of unidentified aerial phenomena, data over restricted U.S. airspace, and an assessment of whether this unidentified aerial phenomenon actively may be attributed to one or more foreign adversaries. It kind of looks like the American public is about to learn even more about what the U.S. government knows about UFOs. Well, I'm not going to hold my breath. People wanted to know what I thought might happen. The way I see it, the bill says they have to report to Congress and various armed service committees a full report about unidentified aerial phenomenon. I still like the term UFOs. I don't see anywhere it saying we, the people, will be told what those people hear. It will probably be all conducted behind closed doors, only allowing in those that they can guarantee to keep their mouths shut. In other words, nobody is going to tell us anything. The government will probably be told about all the UFO sightings that we are already talking about. This will also be done in a heavy legalese language so lovingly used by anybody in the government. This will make understanding what they're saying impossible. A government speech is designed to give people an understanding aimed at whatever they already think the person is saying. The talking heads on TV will give us their understanding of what they get to hear. They'll probably chuckle about it. Oh, these UFO people. You know how they always do. By the end of the day, I doubt we will have anything new to talk about. Oh, yes, there will be lots of theories. There will be lots of people writing books and going on the radio and talking about what a wonderful or a not wonderful job they did in revealing to us the truth behind UFOs. But when everything is said and done, a lot more is going to be said than done. To complicate things, a lot of the information dealing with UFOs is now being held by private companies. All those folks out there at Area 51, the ones we pay for so they get rich, the bill doesn't say anything about releasing what those people know. The bill also includes any type of potential national security threats regarding UFOs and determine if there could be anyone behind them, like other countries or little green men. Just think for a second. Would our government ever lie to us? Don't think about the Gulf of Tonkin or John Kennedy assassination or Watergate or the CIA and LSD or Benghazi. A lot of folks were kicking this bill around with no one having much positive to say about it. This is a lot like what happened back in 2019 when the Navy and the Air Force said they were changing their UFO reporting policies. A lot of folks got excited thinking now we might get more information on UFOs that are being seen by military pilots. They misunderstood the wording. The policies were changed and the men and women making these new reports were placed under new secret standards. If they do see something, they can now file a report to their higher-ups who will then place everything under top-secret classifications. The folks getting access to these reports are the same ones who refuse to tell us anything while living high on the hog on our tax dollars. Do you ever wonder how much an admiral or a general makes a year? It's mind-boggling. Not to mention all the politicians and private contractors and all those other people. FOIA requests will still be sent out, or sent in, I should say. And as usual, these FOIA requests will be set on by the government for as long as they possibly can. And then when they do send something out, it'll be so redacted, or there will be so many black lines drawn through the pages, there won't be any information there, at least not the way I see it happening. In 1961, John Kennedy said, "The very word secrecy is repugnant in the free and open society, and we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemies are advancing around the globe. No war ever posed a greater threat to our society. If you're awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear and its presence has never been more imminent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidations instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conspired vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not public. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced and not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, and no secret is revealed. Daniel Jones was talking about how on November 12, 1963, John Kennedy ordered the CIA director to organize the agency's intelligence files relating to UFOs and to brief him on all unknown by the following February. 10 days later, Kennedy was assassinated. Kind of makes me wonder about this upcoming congressional briefing. Just think about how many ground-breaking UFO sightings have come out of the Navy and the Air Force since 2019 reporting policies changed. None. The secrecy was ramped up. The same will probably hold true with the latest UFO policy. They'll tell us what we already know with a huge pile of mumbo-jumbo that, when analyzed, will amount to nothing. Well, the festival finally wound down at about 10 o'clock. The folks still came by to talk and look at my books. The people cleaning up moved around us until the last person was finished, and I was able to pack up and head to the trailer. Once again, I got to bed at about 1 o'clock in the morning. The heat and the flow of traffic wore me out. During the festival, I drank 5 huge bottles of water and never had to go looking for a bathroom the entire time. I planned to sleep late, but like usual, I woke up at 7 o'clock, since usually I have to get up and feed the dogs and cats while I'm at home. With time on my hands, I decided to get my new computer up to speed. My old computer had decided to stop working. I had to reset everything every time I wanted to use it, and it was getting to be a really big pain in the neck. One time I did manage to get it up running long enough to print a list of all my sites, and I got most of my passwords. Some just didn't make it. It's incredible how many websites I visit that require a password. Not just my bank and email, but sites like RV sites and my credit cards, things I pay online. Then there are the sites I put on the podcast, or put the podcast on. Have to have a different password for each and every one of those. And the bad thing is, just when I think I've got a real good password that I'm going to use everywhere, somebody will pop up and say, no, sorry, that's not strong enough, it's not good enough, you've already used that one in the past, etc., etc. So I have a whole little book full of passwords, and I've got a list of passwords. The Wi-Fi at the RV park was a bit spotty. It would come and go as the day wore on. It would suddenly stop working, and I'd have to sit and wait for the signal to come back in. As people woke up and checked their computers, the signal would get thinner and thinner. You can only put so many computers on one router. Well, I now have a new computer, and I know how to use most of it. I can keep looking for all the information needed to put the podcast together. It's amazing how much faster this new one is. They say every 18 months computers become twice as fast, and, well, it was 6 years since I'd bought my last one. The conference was held at the Ebony Hills Golf Course. The wind was blowing, and it kept pushing my books off the table. I had to hold everything down with rocks. Once I was set up, I walked around and I visited with some of the speakers. Nick Pope was the main guy. Getting in ahead of the crowd gives me a chance to talk without too many interruptions. Michael Hall was set up a few tables down from me. He is a self-proclaimed paranormal lawyer. He was one of the speakers for the evening. His subject for the conference was the Admiral Wilson smoking gun memo. In this document, years after the event unfolded, Admiral Thomas Wilson gives an account of how he was told by Dr. Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project about the existence of special access projects, we call them SAPs, that were holding UFO material. This information led him to search for these projects within the U.S. defense establishment. He ended up finding the SAPs. However, after speaking with the managers, he was denied access to these projects, despite his position as the J2 Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is like the boss being told he doesn't need to know what his employees are working on. In this leaked document, the Admiral tells Eric Davis, who worked for Hal Puthoff of the Earth Tech and To the Stars Academy, that he was told the SAP had a craft that was technologically not of this earth, not made by man, and not by human hands. He was told that the SAP was working on reverse engineering the acquired craft. You can find the whole story by searching Admiral Wilson Smoking Gun Memo. I'd give you more here, but that was all I was able to catch from the speakers. People kept coming by constantly. The empty chairs in front of us began to fill, and people started walking by looking for their favorite celebrities or maybe coming by to buy a book or two. Our tables were set up to the side of the stage, so I'd be able to hear the speakers, but I couldn't see that huge screen. It was at the wrong angle. Anthony Acosta stopped at my table, and he brought me one of his books after buying one of mine. We got to talking, and he told me about his book. It's called Sicarionauts. Sicarionauts. It's a made-up word. Sicarionauts. The plot of the story goes, Sicarios, the most unlikely heroes. Sicarios are hitmen. This gripping tale will take you on the most unforgettable journey through secret spaceports in India to the experimental rocket facility in South Texas and the International Space Station. Follow the exciting misadventures of the worst sicarios ever, as every decision they make takes them on a collision course with destiny. Watch as they inadvertently become the Earth's last line of defense as they are faced with the world's most treacherous terrorists. Anthony said he hoped that his book was kind of along the lines of Terry Pratchett. I'll read it and I'll let you know later on how the book goes. If you're not familiar with Terry Pratchett books, well, you're missing about half your life. Terry Pratchett was an author who wrote somewhere in the vicinity of 98 books. A lot of them take place on a different universe. Their planet actually is flat, and it sits on top of 4 elephants, and these 4 elephants are standing atop a giant space turtle named Atun, and the space turtle flies through the universe looking for its mate. If you didn't read the first and second book by Terry Pratchett, you'd have missed that part. His books are hilarious. They're a little difficult to read sometimes because you have to think along the lines of A, a different universe, and B, they're written in England, so they kind of use a few words differently than we do. Now, still, some of the best books I've ever read. If you watch that TV show, The Watch, well, that was a Terry Pratchett story. Yeah, they kind of changed it for TV, but still you get the basic idea there. If you would like to get a copy of Anthony Acosta's book, Sicarionauts, I believe it's available at Amazon.com. As soon as one person would leave, 2 more would take their place. I talked to so many people I began to worry I was now repeating myself to the same people. I used to wonder why some folks would say the same thing several times, and now I understand. I looked up at the stage, and there was Daryl Sims talking, but I had no idea what he was in the middle of. Trying to focus on the people in front of me, I missed out on Daryl's information. Michael Hall was on stage, and then he wasn't. I caught just enough to know that he was talking about the Admiral Wilson memo, and that was it. It kind of got worse from there. I know Ben Hansen was on stage, but I didn't get a single word. This is not a problem. I was there to sell books and listen to people. I did what I was supposed to do. As Nick Pope was speaking, my table finally cleared out. I was able to listen, and Nick had some good information about his time at the Ministry of Defense. While there, a bunch of photographs had shown up of a diamond-shaped flying craft. Nick took the best photo and hung it on the wall of the office. After 2.5 years, the director came by and said it wasn't appropriate to have something like that on the wall. He took the photo down and he locked it in a safe where all the top-secret stuff was being kept. When the MOD began releasing their documents, they put out a hand-drawn sketch of what had been in the photo. And Nick decided since they had released that image, there was no reason he couldn't do the same, only a much better version. He had an artist draw what he remembers the actual photo had looked like. The folks he used to work with who had seen the photo all agreed the sketch looked exactly the same. If you want to see the recreation of the photo, search for Nick Pope UFO recreation photo, and you'll see a diamond-shaped craft. This is what it looked like. The wind was driving the temperature down. It wasn't cold, but some people were getting a bit uncomfortable. Those in t-shirts and shorts were rubbing their arms trying to stay warm. I could have used a light jacket, but I'd left it in the truck. It was too far to walk for just the last few minutes. Like each year in the past, the UFO conference closed and people began to head home. The speakers all lined up to have their photos taken and sign autographs. I loaded my books and a lot fewer than I had arrived with and headed to the trailer. I wanted to sleep late, but things never go as planned. I was up at 7 o'clock, so I hooked up the trailer and headed north. Here is another advantage of having an RV. I didn't have to look for any of my stuff. I just hooked up my pickup, unplugged the water, the power, and the sewer, and drove away. For the return trip, I listened to Expanded Perspectives. As I was driving along, I heard them read a letter that I had sent in a couple of weeks ago. Back when I was a Border Patrol agent, I was sent out to El Paso to bring back a trailer full of equipment in the middle of January. My partner Dave and I were on duty, but not in uniform since we had to load and unload the trailer ourselves. We stashed our pistols in our bags. We left El Paso en route to San Antonio, and from there Laredo. As the sun was going down about halfway between Fort Stockton and Sheffield, we were running low on gas, so we were looking for a station. Well, there's not much out there. On the side of the road, we saw a sign that said, "Gas Station," right before an exit. I pulled off of I-10 and onto the feeder, which went up a hill and over an overpass. There was no side road, only one way you could take. Once we were on the other side of I-10, the road became narrow, just about one vehicle wide, and it was in really bad shape. Pulling the trailer, we had nowhere to turn around, so we stayed on the road, hoping the gas station was getting close. The road dead-ended in a parking lot of a store. It looked like something out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There were two pumps, with a bulb hanging down at the end of an electric cord. These were the old-style pumps with no pay at the pump available. If not for the gas gauge setting on empty, I would have turned around and left. Dave said he would fill up while I went in and paid. I opened the door, stepped through, and froze. My hand automatically went to the spot where my holster would have been had I been in uniform. Inside the store were 5 or 6 men, mostly in overalls, sitting on folding metal chairs around a black and white TV. They all stared at me without so much as a word. Behind the counter was a skinny guy dressed in only jeans, no shirt or shoes. He was missing way too many teeth. I looked at the guys around the TV, then the guy behind the counter, then back at the guy at the TV. I felt as if they were sizing me up for some nasty event in the near future. That small voice in the back of your head that tries to save you from time to time. I handed the guy behind the counter the government credit card and told him I wanted to fill the truck. He looked at the card and it looked as if he didn't know what it was. Next, he reached under the counter and he pulled out one of those old-style credit card machines, the kind you run back and forth to make an imprint of the raised numbers on the cards. They don't even have those anymore. He had to look around for the right form to place in the machine. Just as he was handing me the receipt, Dave came through the door. He froze, and I saw his hand go to the spot where his holster should have been. He backed out the door, and I followed him as quick as I could without running. Once back on I-10, we talked about what we'd just seen and what we thought we had run into. We talked it over all the way into San Antonio. A couple years later, my wife had to go to San Diego, and so we were driving on I-10. Past Sheffield, I began looking for the exit. There was nothing even remotely like the overpass we'd used that night. When I got home, I looked on MapQuest and Google Earth, but could find no trace of the overpass, the road, or the station. When I was finished listening to all the expanded perspective shows I had, I switched over to The Unexplained with Howard Hughes, the guy from England, and not the millionaire. His guest was Dr. Stephen Greer. I got very interested in what he was saying, and the next thing I knew, I was home, and it was time to park the RV and go in and see my wife. If you've never been to the UFO conference in Edinburgh, now is the time to start planning. After all, the folks in Edinburgh are already working on next year's get-together. It's held in April each year. It's a nice town, the people are friendly, and if you tell somebody in Edinburgh that you're there for the UFO conference, they won't bat an eye. If you're interested in Bigfoot, remember the Texas Bigfoot Research Center will be having the Texas Bigfoot Conference in Jefferson in October of this year. It's a bit of a drive from Laredo, but if you're in the rest of the world, it's not that far to go. Nice little town, great conference, and once again, Cliff Barrickman will be speaking this year, along with Ken Gerhardt and Lyle Blackburn. Make plans to attend these conferences. This is the only way you will ever get to meet the celebrities that you watch on TV all the time. If you have a ghost, UFO, or a cryptid sighting, and you'd like to see it in print, something that hasn't already been told to thousands of people. If you believe it's a true story, something your grandfather, your next-door neighbor, or just some passing acquaintance passed on to you, send it to me. I'll put it into readable form. I'll send you the draft so you can say yes or no whether that's what you want to see in print. And by this time next year, hopefully, all of these stories will be out in my next book. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?